Welcome back to Moving Forward with Young Voices. Hey, we're pleased to welcome Felix Hosse. He is an entrepreneur as well as a Young Voices contributor. Felix, welcome to the program. Tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Felix. I'm an entrepreneur and think tank founder from Berlin, Germany. I founded the Ego Institute, which is I would say, classical liberal think tank here in Berlin. And we are focusing on how to make people aware of how they can live a freer life, in their daily life. It doesn't have to be the grandiose political changes that they should look for, but rather the small changes that they can make in their daily lives to live more free and, flourishing.
Very nice. And I notice I have an article in front of me. I noticed that you've written about Germany's green energy policy. It's been 3 years since I visited Germany, but one thing I noticed is, as a country, they are very, very serious about green energy. Although it hasn't been all good news regarding that green energy. Talk to me a little bit about the push for green energy in Germany and why, even if they're the poster child for the green energy transition, the kid is in trouble, at least at the moment.
That's true. That's true in a way. Germany has been the so-called poster child for the green energy transition, mainly due to their investments into solar and wind, which are seen as, I would say, the most stereotypical of green energies. The problem with those is that they are at times unreliable. Sometimes the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing. What we also did as a country is we phased out, or we limited the time which our nuclear power plants can run. That happened in 2011, and following the Fukushima accident, after the tsunami and the earthquake hit Japan, the nuclear power plant there had a serious emergency, and that frightened a lot of people around here. And we decided to discontinue nuclear power. This leads to a situation in which energy prices are very high in Germany. It's actually one of the highest in the world, and at times we could see energy shortages. So this is why our green energy transition is in big trouble, especially because Germans do not see nuclear power as green energy.
Wow. Now, I have to ask, prior to 2011, how was nuclear power working out for Germany? Were there complaints? Were people concerned? Or was it, an efficient way to provide power, for a first world nation?
Well, I would say both. It was a very good source and reliable source of energy. But in the 1970s, we have to go back to the 1970s actually. There's a big anti-nuclear movement within Germany, and a very influential party now, the Greens, came out of that movement. They formed in 1980. And their foundational story, the story that they have to kind of perpetuate every time, is that they were against nuclear power, and they became very influential after they were founded, not only in parliament but also in pop culture and in every single part of our society. So the anti-nuclear movement has been very strong in Germany, and it has become, the problem is that the population has suffered from those high prices and unreliable energy ever since. And the Green Party cannot let go of that story that they are anti-nuclear and they will never change.
Now, Germany finds itself in kind of an interesting situation thanks to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the various sanctions against Russia. What does this mean in terms of, for the average German family, when it comes to, for instance, heating their home this winter? What are they looking at? Are their costs going to go astronomically up?
Exactly. In order to make up for the lack of power we had by abolishing nuclear, we went and got dependent on Russian gas imports. We actually built even new pipelines to do that. Now that Russia attacked Ukraine and is waging war in Ukraine, by the way, I'm actually right now in Kiev, the German government response was to condemn that attack And Russia, as a response to that and to the international sanctions, limited the supply of gas. So right now, Germans are afraid of the winter, and the gas prices are going to explode in the coming months. We're talking about a 5-fold increase.
Holy cow, 5-fold. I saw a graph the other day that was mind-blowing, and it was from Google. It was Google Analytics of how many people in Germany have been searching up the term firewood. And compared to past years, it went for a very long time. Oh, almost nobody searches it, to boom. There was a huge spike in people looking for firewood, which I assume everybody's trying to do their best to deal with the situation. But, it still sounds like some real unnecessary hardship.
Exactly. A friend of mine and my colleague in the Ego Institute is very familiar with the situation in forestry, and they have had problems with people stealing wood from the forests for years now. But now it is extreme. Now it is another people actually right now in summer preparing for winter by getting wood out of the forest illegally.
So is that pretty tightly regulated? I mean, you don't just grab, some down tree and start throwing it in the car?
This is Germany. Everything is regulated.
Okay. That would make sense. Let me tell you this, or let me ask you this rather. Felix, what would it take for the Green Party to change their tune on nuclear energy? Obviously, that seems like a very straightforward way to address the energy needs of the country. Can they ever change their tune, or does that take all of their legitimacy out from underneath them?
Yes, the problem will be that right now the political pressure is not enough on the Greens. We have a majority of Germans who want to at least extend the time that we keep our last remaining power plants running. Those are 3, and this is roughly 40% of our nuclear capacity. They should run out at the end of this year, but the majority of Germans is for extending that time. The Greens are in the predicament that their voter base is very much opposed to this extension, and the public has right now, and the media has the job to basically put them under political pressure to extend that. And it has to become known that the Greens would be responsible for the major price increase that we're facing, and even for some instances of brown and blackouts.
Wow.
What we're looking at right now is, in my opinion, the most obvious example of a class conflict in a way. Because Green voters are usually well off. They're the intellectuals. They're not the ones who are like the handymans or anybody who is really reliant on a lot of energy. They're not industrial workers and anything like that. So those are the public servants and the so-called intelligentsia, and they are in a way with their political decisions waging a class war from above rather than the other way around.
So I have to ask, as people are feeling the pain this winter, and I don't just mean the trades workers, but I assume this is going to affect just about everybody. If there's enough pain, is it likely that they either ask the Green Party to step aside or simply vote them out of power so that they can move toward more common sense solutions?
I didn't see any points where the pressure must come from the public. I do not see any elections coming up which are important enough for the Greens to take, I would say, enough punishment in this regard to change their minds really. The more the prices rise, the more the pressure will rise. And it's yet to be seen if without those significant elections, the pressure can be high enough.
Okay. Felix, we got about 1 minute left here. Let me ask you this. How can people get a better feel for nuclear energy? And I mean, to make up their minds. I think I would be in favor of it, but where can they at least get some solid information about how safe it is versus how safe it isn't, and then make those decisions based on what they know?
I think the problem right now with nuclear energy is that the accidents and the emergencies were very highly publicized, but they were never really talked about how how bad those were. If you, for example, look at Fukushima and how many people died over there, it is not even clear that a lot of people died from the radiation itself, but rather from the evacuations and anything like that. So really look into the actual risks that nuclear power has, and also look at the stats. The stats, for example, show that per kilowatt hour, nuclear power is one of the safest energy sources that we have available. So look at those and look at the numbers rather than the narratives.
Okay. We're talking with Felix Hosse. He is a Young Voices contributor. Felix, where can people follow you on social media?
I think I'm most active right now on my Twitter account, especially in my capacity as a contributor. This is The Free Felix, so The Free Felix, Felix, on Twitter. That's probably the best place to start.
Welcome back to Moving Forward with Young Voices. So glad you could join us today, and I'm happy to welcome yet another new voice to the program. I'd like to welcome Neetu Arnold. Neetu, welcome to the show. Tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Neetu, and I work as a senior research associate at the National Association of Scholars, where we focus a lot on higher education policy. One of the areas of focus is higher education finances.
Well, that's been on a lot of people's minds here lately. In fact, I think it was just yesterday I was hearing some talk about maybe some targeted student loan debt forgiveness, and that always seems to get people talking. Now, I'm looking at an article that you have written for lawliberty.org that's about a novel plan to reduce student debt. And you mentioned that there's actually a court case that could have some impact on this. Would you walk us through that, please?
Yes. So my recent article highlights a 1970s Supreme Court case, Griggs versus Duke Power Company, which resulted in the artificial increase in demand for a college degree. Now, before I go into more details of that court case, I think it's important to discuss why college prices have increased in the first place. And it's because there's a high demand for education. And there are a couple of contributing factors here. First, the availability of easy accessibility to student loans has made it easier for so many people to go to college, but it's also given universities they don't have a good incentive to lower their costs. They know that when they increase their prices, students can simply turn to the student loans to offset any of those increases. So that's issue number one. And then issue number two is that many employers often require a college degree. And so for many students, they often go to college not for knowledge's sake, but because the college degree is seen as a golden ticket to good jobs. So this is where Griggs versus Duke Power Company comes in. And so going back to this case, this is where it comes back to Griggs versus Duke Power Company. Duke Power Company had instituted a high school diploma and aptitude tests on the day the Civil Rights Act of 1964 took place. And, as a result, the plaintiffs in the case argued that having such educational requirements fostered racial discrimination. And so that's why this court case was brought up to the Supreme Court. And so the Supreme Court agreed, but they also admitted that they couldn't find any discriminatory intent for Duke Power Company. Because they couldn't find that discriminatory intent, the Supreme Court decided to rely on a legal theory known as disparate impact, which disparate impact says that if there are any differential outcomes in policies based on any protected class, such as race, sex, etc., that can serve as proof of discrimination. So for many employers, they feared any legal liability as a result of this court case. And that's because if they instituted any tests that resulted in a disparate impact, then or disparate outcomes, then they could be taken to court. And so for many employers, they decided to turn to the college degree as a proxy for intelligence, talent, and skills.
Is the college degree, is that really a good signal of this person has the right talent and skills, or does it leave something to be desired?
Yeah, so I don't think it's the best measure for talent or skills. I can understand why the employers may have thought that a college degree could be a good signal for that. During the college admissions process, colleges can often filter candidates based on test scores, for example. But how you do on a test and what you learn in college doesn't always equate to vocational success and preparation. And I think what the interesting thing here is that the results of Griggs actually changed the purpose of higher education. And so I think higher education now tries to serve two competing missions. On one hand, they try to fulfill the mission of education, but they also try to fulfill this mission of vocational preparation. And so I think in the process, they end up diluting the either the vocational mission or the education mission. And so students end up missing out, and it doesn't really help anybody.
You point out in your article that there are other places in life where we can see some disparities, but nobody has really stepped up to say, hey, this needs to be addressed. For instance, you point out black athletes outnumber all other racial groups in mainstream sports like football and basketball. So according to that disparate impact theory, well, we ought to have some quotas in place to make sure that professional sports are being fair, for non-black athletes. But we really don't see a call for that, do we?
No, we don't. And I don't think we should, because we want the best players, for example, in our sports. And that same logic should apply in jobs, in college admissions. We want people who are better prepared, people who can best meet our employment needs. We want the best people on the job. And something like disparate impact goes against those goals.
Wow. So talk to me about merit-based hiring. Obviously, to me, that makes sense. You're getting the best person for the job, the person who has the skills or has the background to do this job correctly. Why don't companies, why did companies fear legal liability? Was it this court case that made them wonder, well, if we don't, have enough representation of this group or that group, we're going to be facing some kind of legal action, perhaps?
Yes, I think that was the fear, that if they implement any test, then that results in disparities, then they could be sued or they could be taken to court. So I think that's a big reason for why many of these companies turned to the college degree as a signal.
Would more or fewer people take out student loans if the need for a degree in order to get their foot in the door for a job was no longer there?
Oh, okay. So I don't think that people would be taking out more student loans if that degree requirement wasn't there, and that would just be because there would be alternatives to higher education, and again, if you can shorten the degree, the amount it takes to complete the degree program, or if employers are not even having a higher education as a job requirement, then for people who are especially talented, then they could just take the test and, they could forego a college education in some of those instances.
And maybe it would shift the balance back towards where colleges and universities are no longer there to act as a massive jobs program, right?
Yes, absolutely. I don't think universities should necessarily serve as a massive jobs program. That doesn't mean that they don't have any purpose. They can be a great environment for discussing interesting ideas and even the craziest ideas and refining them there. And it can also be a good place to meet like-minded people or people who are even different from you. But we need to separate those two missions of higher education and vocational preparation.
Okay, very good. We're talking with Neetu Arnold. She is with Young Voices. And Neetu, tell our listeners where they can follow your work and where they can find you on social media.
Yes, so I post a lot of my stuff on Twitter. So you can follow me at NEETU_Arnold.
Very good. Thank you so much for being our guest. I hope we get to talk again soon.
Yes, thank you.
And we are back. This is Moving Forward with Young Voices. Very happy to welcome Noah Khogali. Did I even come close there on your last name, Noah?
It's close enough.
Close enough, okay. You can help me with the pronunciation. I won't take offense. How do you say your last name?
Sorry. Khogali. Khogali. I've heard as many different pronunciations as there could possibly be. So, yeah, kind of goes over my head now.
All right. And you're checking in today from Scotland, which is good because we're going to be talking a little bit about the Scottish independence movement. But before we go to the topic, first of all, tell us just a little bit about yourself, about who you are and what you do.
So I'm Noah Khogali. I'm a local politician. So we deal with all the really fun stuff, looking after the roads, bin collections, education, all the stuff that people can see out of their window, but also do lots of political commentary as well. That's the real passion, is being able to look outside and talk about what's going on. And I like the sound of my own voice, basically.
Well, that's good. No, you're in the right business then. Now, it wasn't so long ago I just had a conversation with another Young Voices contributor about the race for the UK's next prime minister. And, I know that in America we tend to get kind of tunnel vision about what's going on in our own elections and whatnot. But talk to me a little bit about what this race for UK prime minister means for the Scottish independence movement.
Yeah, it's odd because we operate a very different political system to you, obviously. But this final runoff for Conservative Party leadership that will lead to the next PM feels very presidential for us. And that's meant that obviously there's been a huge amount more scrutiny on the individual characters than you'd normally get. We'd normally be talking a lot about the parties and their positions. But, it's quite rare and it's quite interesting. It's new that we get to talk about individual policy positions for two people from the same party. So especially in Scotland, that's really, really important. So as a basis, it's really, really key to remember that they're trying to appeal to Conservative Party members, not everybody. So first and foremost, to become PM, they have to get the votes of people that are, by and large, pro the Union, anti-Scottish independence, and that's going to be the main bit of rhetoric that they talk about. So there's been lots and lots of posturing, lots of different tacks taken. It's a really long process. So I think we started with Liz Truss, who is one of the candidates, essentially saying she was going to ignore Nicola Sturgeon, who is the separatist leader of the Scottish Parliament, which is one of the devolved administrations. And she's kind of moved beyond just saying she would completely ignore her, which didn't get the best reception, to saying that she'd make sure that Westminster and the UK government really, revamped its presence in Scotland. And it wasn't just a case of devolve powers and forget. And that, Westminster and her possible administration, if that happened, would be really, really present in Scotland.
So it seems, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember a few years ago there was a pretty good amount of talk regarding Scottish independence and a move towards a vote towards independence. This would have been around the time of Brexit, I believe. Am I remembering this right? I'm sorry, I wasn't paying as close of attention then.
It's something that comes up a fair amount. It's basically the SNP, who are the lead ruling party in Scotland. It's basically their only talking point. That is the main crux. And they're essentially a one-issue party. So they bring it up every possible occasion they can. There was a referendum, obviously, in 2014, in which the Scottish people decided they were going to remain in the UK. And ever since then, basically every 6 months, the Scottish Nationalist Party decide again that it's time for a next referendum. So since then, the Leave side have never really had a consistent lead in the polls. It looked for the entire time essentially like probably between 52 and 54% of Scots want to remain in the UK. And that's probably been the case the entire time. But when it's looked like the union may, maybe on its last legs, maybe a little bit shaky, has especially been in the last couple of years with Brexit and the massive outcry from lots of Scottish people who voted Remain that felt like they were being pulled out of the EU, and Boris Johnson, essentially. Those two Bs were essentially every single argument the SNP tried to use for a good few years there about why Scotland needed to be independent, and they're gone now. So the next steps for them as a movement will be really, really interesting.
Wow. How long has that Scottish independence movement been going on? I'm ready to hear the answer. Maybe hundreds of years, perhaps.
Well, it's been probably an underlying thing for the entire time that the union existed. So you're looking genuinely hundreds of years. But it really started to rear its head again in mainstream politics, probably at the end of the 90s, when devolution across the UK, so the regional parliaments for Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, really came to a fore, and they started to be given some, significant control. And that was designed, I think, by the Labour Party that was in government at the time. They thought it would put an end to talk of independence because they were giving controls back locally. But that's not really what happened. And it kind of gave a platform for these nationalist parties, these quite radical movements. It gave them a large mouthpiece. And that's essentially where we've ended up is, we've got a nationalist government in Scotland that speaks for maybe 45% of the population, consistently calling to break up the country that they reside in.
Wow. So talk to me about how is Scotland doing as far as whether it's as part of the union or just, on its own economically, or are they on fairly solid ground? Do they find that, they need this union to stay in place?
Yeah, I think every serious economist in the UK and Scotland would probably say that it would be a very, very, very bad economic idea for Scotland to leave the union. And essentially the argument for separatism and for the Scottish nationalists is mostly an emotional one. So I think pre-COVID, it's probably been thrown up a little bit in the air now, but pre-COVID, if Scotland had left the union, its deficit would have been something like 13%, which would have been the highest in Europe by some margin. And not a great idea for a country that, first of all, would need to establish its own currency, its own military, its own health service, everything. But where it is now is still not a great situation. So at the moment, if you go to Edinburgh, which is, capital of Scotland, it is literally overflowing with rubbish. It absolutely stinks. And that's because essentially the SNP have slashed the budgets for local councils and everyone's gone on strike. And you're going to see across Scotland these strikes really ramp up because the Scottish nationalists have decided that it is them that is, the all-powerful, all-conquering party, and nobody else should have any influence. And it's led to essentially everybody striking and the country falling apart a little bit.
It sounds like this might be a really difficult place to find middle ground between the two opposing sides. Is there any such possibility?
There's always people you'd hope that reside in the middle ground. When that really dies is when you end up with a country on a really, really dangerous path. But last week there was the two Conservative leadership candidates came to Scotland to have a husting. So it's almost like a debate. I think it's probably quite a British thing where they both go and have their own 5 minutes. They both get questioned individually, but it's one big event. And outside, the Scottish nationalists were throwing eggs, using words I don't think I can use on the radio, and being intensely disruptive. And it was really quite obvious then that there is a vitriol there, there's a hatred there, that is really coming from one side, that looks like it's pushing people on the middle ground back towards the union. And to be honest, for most unionists is probably quite helpful because they are doing their cause real damage with the aggression, with the violence. But you've got to hope that there is still middle ground there, because the day that dies is the day that every country is headed on a very dangerous path.
So I'm curious, what exactly do the nationalists see as the goal if Scotland were to achieve its independence? What is the payoff to them?
It's purely an emotional thing. So they firmly believe that Scotland should just be its own independent country and nothing else matters. So it would, essentially me in my own little world, if I thought that I would be better at ruling it than anybody else, essentially like a child, that's what I would be setting up my mission to do. But the really interesting thing is that there's lots of suspicions that leading Scottish nationalists don't actually want it to happen. And this is just a really, really easy emotional argument to make electorally that will keep you in power forever. It's really important to remember that if independence ever happened, the Scottish Nationalist Party would disappear overnight, because that is the only thing they've ever set out to do. So it's not actually necessarily in their interest for Scottish independence to ever happen.
So they would essentially work themselves right out of a job.
Yeah, and SNP MPs have been saying that over the past couple of days, that if Scottish independence ever happened, they would leave right away. So, there has been allegations they're basically leading their supporters, stringing them along, and this is one big con to stay in power. I might be overly cynical to suggest that was exactly what was going on, but there may be some truth in that.
Okay, Noah, we've got about 30 seconds left here. If people want to become better informed on this issue, what are some of the sources that you trust?
The Times and the Scotsman are probably the best two. They're both really balanced on both sides of the debate, but also really, really fantastically sourced. And especially in politics, as messy as up here, well-sourced stories are probably the best thing. Okay,
we're talking with Noah Khogali. Again, I'm doing my best with your last name there.
Nice enough.
Where can people find you? Where can they follow you on social media?
So lots of Scottish politics on Twitter. So Khogali, Noah. I'll spell Khogali because it's just awful. So Noah, obviously, and then Khogali.
Very good. Thanks so much for being my guest. I hope we talk again soon.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back. This is our fourth and final segment of Moving Forward with Young Voices today. Very happy to welcome Cayden Rosenbaum to the program. Cayden, this is your first time aboard, so first of all, good to meet you. Tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Hi, so my name is Caden Rosenbaum, and I am the Tech and Innovation Policy Analyst at the Libertas Institute. For those of you not in Utah, that's Libertas. And it's based out of Lehi, Utah. And I've been there for a little under a year now, focusing on tech and innovation policy.
Okay. I'm looking at an article that you wrote for Real Clear Markets about how consumers will be the winners from Amazon's iRobot purchase. And I have to admit, I don't have the first clue what iRobot is. Can you bring me up to speed on what that means?
Sure. So I don't know that most people know what iRobot is in general, because most people know it from its product name, which is Roomba, right? The little robot vacuums that mop and sweep our floors and vacuum up all the crumbs from our kids when we're away. iRobot is the one that started the whole movement towards having a Roomba in your home, not vacuuming as much, letting a robot do it for you, all the convenience, right?
Okay. Hey, I'm down. Look, I have two dogs, and I don't think the little vacuum robot that we have is a Roomba brand, but man, that thing saves me so much time of chasing dog hair around. Wow.
I've got a similar problem. I've got a lab mix that sheds like crazy and a Pomeranian that sheds like crazy. And I have a Roomba and a Scuba on every floor just to make sure I don't have to waste any time cleaning up after them. Every half day or so.
Now I don't feel so bad about being with the times. Normally I don't care if I'm trendy or not, but this one saves me a lot of labor. So I understand there were some misgivings some people had about Amazon buying iRobot. What was the concern there?
So there's a lot of misgivings in general about most of the big tech companies for various reasons. Amazon's big gripe is most commonly that it's too big. There are lots of monopoly concerns that come along with being a big company in the market today. And the monopoly concerns of the home device market, the smart home device market, is very relevant for this purchase because it's buying a smart device that would also go in your home, one that many people have, including you and I, although we may have different brands. And then there were concerns about data privacy, right? This robot is able to map your home. The Roomba is able to map your home and In some cases, if you've opted in, if you said, yes, you may collect this data explicitly, then the device can actually ping you or ping devices in your home that and tell you where it's at. And the big concern is that Amazon will use that data to market more products at you. But the misgivings have really two big holes. One is that the data privacy concerns aren't as founded as they might be for a smaller company, because Amazon has a lot of skin in the game, and it must comply with a lot of data privacy laws that mean if they're going to collect that kind of data for that kind of use, they have to give a lot of consent to consumers. That's great, because that means that argument is unfounded. And on the monopoly concern, it's really hard to figure out what a market is in general. So the smart home devices market, just adding a robot vacuum is probably not going to move the needle significantly towards giving Amazon a monopoly over your home, right? But those were relevant, I think, concerns to put forth. I think anytime a big acquisition like this happens, we should all at least consider them. And so while I didn't buy them in the end, they were still relevant, still something to consider.
Now, you actually point out there are a couple of other examples where Amazon made acquisitions or had a very dominant position in the market, and it actually turned out for the better. For instance, talk to me about Ring doorbells.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you've ever seen one of those camera events where the Ring doorbell is on your front door or someone's front door, and they have a video of something bizarre happening. Maybe somebody has knocked on the door and is trying to sell drugs or trying to scam you, and they just stay on the Ring doorbell. Or there are situations where a plant exploded in Texas, I think, and the Ring doorbells all caught it. And you could see people coming out in their underwear and just yelling, "What is happening? What is happening?" Right? Ring doorbell has become a really important home security tool for a lot of people. Every time someone comes to your door, they ring the little doorbell, the Ring takes a recording of them. And that's great for a lot of people who maybe aren't home all the time, or they may be home and don't want to come to the door for security reasons. Maybe they feel threatened whenever someone comes to the door. Ring doorbell gives a wall of separation where you can talk to the person at the door. You could, even if you have a smart home lock, unlock the door for a babysitter or a pet sitter. And it allows you to monitor who comes in and out of your house. That's really important. Amazon bought Ring a while back in 2018. And one of the improvements that Amazon made right off the bat was lowering prices. The Ring doorbell has been great since it acquired it. But it's always been, around $299 for one of these. And Amazon lowered the price here recently. The base model of a 2020 version, which is improved. It's a newer year. It doesn't have some of the malfunctions, is only $100.
Wow.
And that's not even Prime Day, right? And so the improvements that Amazon has made first is price, but also in improving quality. They now have 4K cameras. They now have Wi-Fi enabled systems that let you check in and take little clips. Amazon doesn't just buy things to acquire the market. It also buys things to take in talent and improve those products and make them not only more affordable, but better for consumers.
So, Cayden,
and that's only the first.
What might that mean then for owners or for people who will eventually own an iRobot, Roomba vacuum?
Right. Well, speaking from experience, the Roomba and the Scuba have, I would say, a product life. After about 2 years of heavy dog hair and regular use, the product does need some refurbishing, right? I have to take mine apart regularly, almost semi-annually, get all the hair out of there and replenish the brushes, buy new brushes and a new little swivel brush thing to go in there. And I think one of the improvements that Amazon will probably make is to improve how long a Roomba can be used, or if not that, at least lower the price so that when you go to buy a new Roomba, because yours has been severely infested with dog hair, it's affordable and it's not a prohibitive expense where you just think, no thanks, I'll just hand vacuum from now on. That's one improvement. The other improvement that I foresee is using Amazon's logistics program, right? What it uses in its warehouse to deliver products to and fro. I can see that improving the maps that the robot uses, because if you have a robot now, a Roomba now, you know that the thing will bump in and off of things. It'll move chairs if they're too lightweight, and it can sometimes fall off of steps. I think that that's going to be improved in the future through Amazon's acquisition.
So people shouldn't immediately, get nervous about, they're getting the monopoly. Now they're going to, just stick it to everybody because they have that monopoly. In many cases, it appears Amazon doesn't just operate as a monopoly, but they'll take something and improve it and actually make it more available than it was before. Exactly.
And in some cases, that improvement, that acquisition improves a lot of things, right? Like Amazon purchased Whole Foods, for example, in 2018. And since then, we have Amazon Fresh now, where we can order groceries inside that sometimes come from Amazon. If you get the wrong package from Amazon, maybe you ordered the wrong size of shoe, you take your shoes to Whole Foods instead of having to deal with a UPS and a shipping label. They also acquired Alexa back in 1999 when it was just an add-on to a browser. And nowadays, it's a personal assistant. I'm honestly surprised mine hasn't gone off since I said its name. And really what Amazon could do with iRobot is more than just a consumer product. It can use it in its warehouses for e-commerce and fulfillment, meaning it could use the experience and the technical knowledge of iRobot's engineers to improve warehouses. And then also, as it builds out its delivery programs, its autonomous delivery programs, it can use the same logistics and mapping to deliver out to consumers. And that's going to be a really great asset for Amazon, and for consumers, a really great convenience tool.
Cayden, one of the things I like about your approach is this is definitely a glass half full approach. I know some people, and I would have been this way myself at one point, what, robots taking our jobs? Oh, no, what are we going to do? But thankfully, I've had some people who are very good who helped me understand, actually, that's going to free people up to do jobs that matter even more than whatever it is the robot's doing.
And listen, someone has to service the robots. They're not fully contained. They will break down, and that creates tons of jobs in the process.
All right, we're talking with Cayden Rosenbaum. He is a Young Voices contributor as well as the Technology and Innovation Policy Analyst at Libertas Institute, based in Lehi, Utah. Cayden, where can people follow your work? Where can they find you on social media?
So they can find me first and foremost at libertas.org, which is libertas.org. And secondly, my Twitter is going to be the best place to find me, and that's just at Cayden Rosenbaum.
Very good. Great to visit with you. I hope we get a chance to talk again here soon.
Same to you. Thanks for having me.